Hi, I'm Coach Takeshi. Does Agile work? It's a valid question, and the easiest way to prove it does is to show by example. So, I'm starting a new series of curating Agile success stories. The first story I'd like to share is with Justin Yu from Liberty Mutual's innovation arm, Solaria. As you'll see, Justin is a very relaxed and laid-back person, but what he and his team is accomplishing is amazing. His team operates like a startup in a 100-year-old company and has brought to the market a complex digital insurance product in a short time frame of only 3 to 4 months. Now that's remarkable. Justin's story is a beautiful example of a concept called Ambidextrous Organizations. I have a primer video on the concept up here. If you're interested, please follow the link, and I'll leave the link at the end of this clip as well. So, let's learn from Justin and his Agile success story. Please enjoy. Welcome to my very first episode of Agile Success Stories. Today I have Justin Yu from Liberty Mutual's Innovation Arm, Solaria Labs. Justin?
Hey, Takeshi, how's it going?
Very good, very good. All right, well, Justin is a fellow design thinker, and he's very passionate about disrupting insurance. Today I've asked him to share us his success with Simplify, Liberty Mutual's innovative digital insurance product in Hong Kong. And what's it like to do product development in an innovative insurance product like this? So first question, Justin, what do you do and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so right now I'm product manager for Solaria Labs. I actually moved to Singapore about 2.5 years ago, and I've been in insurance in my entire career. Started off very much in the data and analytical space as an actuary, but wanted to move to something that was closer to the customer and had bigger impact to the business. And that's how I landed in innovation.
So from actuary to product development innovation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I jumped in knowing that insurance was going to be a space that was going to be heavily disrupted, and things are going to change very quickly over the next decade, especially when you think about new technologies and the way that customer experiences are changing a lot. So for me personally, I'm very passionate about building things from scratch, whether it's new products, new teams, new operations. I like the process of taking an idea and making it into something real.
I see. And tell us about Simplify.
Yeah, sure. So maybe it's important to set the context here for insurance disruption, right?
Please.
So we're in Asia, and in Asia, I think it's important to make a distinction because all the countries are very different, right? So you have countries which have underserved populations in insurance. So there's an opportunity there to basically get people to start thinking about insurance and adopting it, right? And on the flip side, you also have the more mature markets like Hong Kong and Singapore. And that's really where, disruption in terms of business model, thinking about new products and how we apply new technologies to make insurance more interactive and change the way customers think about insurance comes into play. So Simplify was basically our play in Hong Kong as to create a new way of buying life insurance. It only takes 15 minutes for the customer to buy a new policy end to end. And they also get a policy that's tailored to their individual needs. And that's really the key distinction here, which is how can we make life insurance more personalized for the customer?
Tell us more about the tailor-made personalized element.
Yeah, sure. So when you think about a typical term life policy, you buy something for 30 years, you might get $1 million of coverage over that period of time. But what a lot of customers realize, and this is actually through the process of just getting to talk to them, is when they first start off, they're earlier in their careers, they're thinking about having families, they may have a mortgage, for example. Generally, they have more need for higher coverage, right? So someone might actually need $2 million of coverage to begin with. But over time, as their children graduate from university, as they save more money for retirement, as they pay off their mortgage, those coverage needs can decrease. So typically what ends up happening is when you buy the flat term life policy, the customer will typically be underinsured at the very beginning, but at the end, they'll actually be overinsured. So the whole point of Simplify was to give that tailored term life where the coverage changes with them as they hit specific life milestones, right? So paying off their mortgage. When their kids graduate, their coverage needs will change as well. So as they go through their life policy, they also get lower premiums as well. So you never have to worry about paying more or less for your insurance.
I see. So not a flat term life insurance, not an linear amortizing life insurance, but very tailored particularly to the age of when that customer is going to come in and what kind of family life they're envisioning, career life they're envisioning. So each story is very different, and you need to price that differently.
Exactly.
But still deliver it within 15-20 minutes time.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a beautiful example of using digital for that. What was the key challenge that you had to overcome in structuring this product, and how did you go to do the product development? What was the product development of a very new category product like this? It must be very different, right?
Yeah, so I think there's really two pieces that we think about in insurance disruption, right? The first more practical challenge is always the regulatory piece. Every country has its own sets of rules and regulations when you launch a new insurance product. Simplify has its own issues, right, when it was trying to launch in Hong Kong, because digital is very new, right? Especially for a policy that's long-term and with high-level amounts of coverage to it. So as we think about adopting things like digital questionnaires, underwriting that's done online, even like e-signatures, you have to make sure that you follow the rules and regulations, but you also push the boundaries too and make sure that you have buy-in from all of the people that are involved in the project, because we would be one of the first in market, right? Which is exciting but also scary at the same time. I think the other big challenge, right, and this is more to do with when you're in market, is there will be an aspect of education involved. Customers, even though we were in a more developed market, very mature market for insurance, to be able to sell insurance online, even though term life could be considered more simple of all the life insurance policies out there, there's always going to be an educational component to it. And how do you do that effectively in a world where it's more digital and you're trying to go after customers that may not necessarily have life insurance top of mind? So I think those are the two biggest challenges.
Yeah, so the regulatory challenges that you need to address, really pushing the boundaries for that. And the second thing is customer education, because it's a new category of product. And that's really an important thing because, like you said, Asia is very fragmented, and each country market is very different, right?
Yeah.
So probably a traditional approach of insurance product development is too heavyweight compared to that a digital insurance product is much more nimble, agile in delivering. So you make best use of digital in this case.
Yes, absolutely.
So talk about regulatory environment. Obviously, there's a lot of dialogue with regulators. Probably a lot of stakeholders, partners involved. That begs me the next question. Tell us about how you develop this as a team and how you take the whole environment, including the stakeholders and the partners. How did you manage this whole big group of people?
Yeah, so I break it down into two ways, right?
Okay.
The first is Solaria kind of operates as its own mini startup. So we actually have a team of developers and engineers, UX designers and consumer researchers, all within our team, and we're all working together to build this product, right? So my role as a product manager is fairly similar to what you would find in most tech companies, right? Managing the features that we build, making sure that everything we build is optimal for the customer, and making sure we hit our timelines. The other piece is working with the operational folks back at Liberty, right? So, we have teams in distribution, in underwriting, regulatory and compliance. And it's important to basically get their buy-in to building a product that is gonna change the way that they typically do business, right? Insurance as an industry can lag sometimes in terms of its development. So although it's exciting, you have to make sure that you align all those stakeholders and make sure that they're excited about the product and they understand that they're doing something which is going to make a better customer experience at the end of the day.
I see. So it's really a hybrid environment, right? You have the traditional side of the insurance. You mentioned the folks at Liberty, and then the very startup-like environment of your team. Which is the Solaria, part of it. And integrating that, probably that was what your role as product manager was.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, that's great. So, I guess the next question I wanted to ask is that in any product development, there's always surprises and a lot of things that don't go as expected, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Share us your experience.
Yeah, I mean like I said, one of the initial challenges that we faced was realizing that it's not that straightforward to sell insurance. It is within your existing experience or your app or your website, whatever it is that you're building, how you can make it better for the customer so that they end up adopting your product, right? The realization is that innovation isn't something that happens overnight. It requires iteration after iteration and talking to your customers and constantly testing your product. I think, again, when we think to challenges, it's always going to be making sure that everyone is aligned with what it is that you're building. Alignment is always key, right? Whether it's within Solaria, making sure that we all understand why it is that we're building a certain feature set, and then also making sure that we understand why we're doing it for the business as a whole. So I think those are the two biggest challenges there.
Got it. And the length of the product development, what was it like? How long was it?
Yeah, so it'll always depend on the product. From our end, it wasn't an extremely complex website that we were building. So end to end, it could take anywhere from 3 to 4 months. We did have some partners involved in this, so it did extend our timeline, just given the fact that we needed to get all the legal aspects of those partnerships going, and also kind of integrating the technology from both sides. So that did slow us down a little bit, but overall the way we work is very scrappy, I'll say, and typically the product development time isn't too long. Even though regulation could slow us down, the key is, as you build out new pieces to your product, is to get it in front of your customers as soon as possible. You don't necessarily have to have it in market. Obviously, the results may not be as accurate, right? But at least you can get a directional read as to how customers are going to react to certain parts of your app or your website, and then you can make adjustments as you go so that you don't have to wait until you've actually launched the product in market.
Yeah. Tell us about how you iterate this customer dialogue. Can you give us some examples of, earlier on ways of testing with your customer, and then towards the end, how that customer dialogue has changed?
Yeah, sure. It's funny, like one of the things that we always assumed with insurance is that you want to make everything as simple as possible. So when we think about insurance, there's a lot of fine print, right? So it could be pages and pages of documents, statements and conditions which they have to sign off on. And we really tried our best to make it shorter and easier to understand. And over time, as our product was in market, we realized that customers actually want the longer regulatory and compliance side of things sometimes. depending on the product, right? And the reason why is because it adds legitimacy to your product. Maybe it's because they're just very used to a certain way in which documents are presented to them. And it might ultimately depend on the customer, but we realize that it's not necessarily always the case that you need to make things as short as possible. So that was like a realization. There are lots of the changes that we made to simplify, for example, to make the experience as seamless as possible as well. So when you think about underwriting and life insurance, they might have to answer lots of questions. Sometimes they have to do a medical test. Our product doesn't require that medical test. They just do a questionnaire which asks them about their health and lifestyle, and then we're able to give them an instant quote. So that was something that we had to iterate on to make sure that we balance between asking the question so that we can accurately determine the risk, but make sure that for the customer, they're able to complete the survey by themselves without feeling like we're asking too many questions too.
Yeah, it's always a balance, isn't it? Risk and customers' convenience.
Yeah.
So that took iterations.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And who did these dialogues with the customer?
So our team has consumer researchers. We have UX researchers as well. They're the ones that are really going out there talking to customers. The way that we generally worked is we pick a space that we're interested in. When we built Simplify, is specifically more around life insurance and planning for the future, right? And we do these sprints, which are led by our consumer researcher to delve deeper into what are these customers' perceptions around planning for the future and life insurance, so that we can understand their pain points a little further and develop new ideas and solutions to address those pain points. As we get closer to launching a product, or when you have a product in market, UX and consumer research partner together to really refine the product. They run sprints where they'll actually put our product in front of customers, looking at how they react to it, how they use it, really looking at like those tiny little details to understand how we can make a better experience for them.
So front-end development people were working together with the consumer researchers.
Yes.
That's awesome. You used the word scrappy, and I really like that word. I sort of sense it demonstrates the, I would say, cross-functional, overlapping nature of the way you do things in your team. Tell us about that scrappiness.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Agile, right, there's usually like 2-week sprints or stand-ups. When we did our initial set of products, we were a small team. It was just a team of 10 people within Solaria. Actually, about 5-6 people just working on Simplify, right? So we didn't actually do the typical stand-up /sprint. I mean, when there was a question or when there was an issue, for example, it was just a matter of me shouting out to one of my teammates and just asking them, hey, how do we address this? And we just problem solve together. Now, that's not always sustainable as your team gets bigger, and as we put a product into market, as our team grew, we did start implementing 1-week stand-ups, for example. But I think the beauty of a Scrappy Team is that you're able to solve on the spot, and you don't have to wait for a stand-up to happen.
That's great. And after launch, how did you, post-launch, how did you monitor the customer success?
Yeah, so there's several ways of doing it, right? And there's fairly standard kind of using Google Analytics. We have a Hotjar, for example, which looks at the
Hotjar.
Yes, Hotjar is the name of it, and it records like the user's mouse movements, for example. So that we are actually able to observe, like, are there certain sections of the website that we're stopping at, or they click back? Why is it that they do that, for example? And then, of course, as I mentioned, there is the consumer and UX research piece where we actually go up and talk to customers and do more of the qualitative piece as well. There's lots of metrics that you could use, but ultimately, from our end, it was a matter of, are we able to create an experience which allows customers of high intent to actually buy. That would be the first thing. And because digital was new in Hong Kong, were we able to improve people's awareness of the fact that we were offering a digital product, right? Were organic searches and people organically going to our website increasing over time as we spent more advertising dollars, for example. So those were sort of the metrics that we were looking at.
I see. And the iteration cycle, post-launch, the continuous improvement part. What was the iteration cycle like? Now continuing.
Yeah. So again, because of the scrappy nature, if we spotted something that could be improved, we would work on it right away, right? Over time, as we had longer lists of improvements that we could make, we had to prioritize based on sort of a mix of the impact to the customer experience and to the kind of engineering practicality and how much effort it would take. But ultimately, as long as we knew that what we were changing had a positive impact to the customer, nothing could really stop us.
Nothing could really stop you.
Yeah,
nothing could really stop you. And you mentioned that you don't do Scrum sprints, you don't do formal 2-week sprints and so on, but nothing stops you. Everybody is still active on that. Tell us why that's happening.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think when we kind of built our team and when we onboard them, we put them through design thinking training. We kind of go over kind of our core mandates and philosophies, and at the end of the day, it is all about the customer.
It is all about the customer.
Yeah, and I think it was important to hire people that were aligned with that. We're not building things necessarily just to get money, right?
Yeah.
It's about, can we create something that customers actually want? That's the ultimate question for us.
A group of creators that want to create something for the customer.
Yeah, so exactly.
Choosing the team.
Yes.
With that motivation was very important.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good. Can I share an observation?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Sure. So one of the key attractions of Scrum sprints is the time box nature of sprint, and because you automatically put in discipline, and that allows the whole team to continuously be on top of what they're supposed to be doing. Now, if applied wrong, Scrum becomes a control mechanism, and actually defeats the whole purpose of self-organization. So what's important here is the communication and the motivation, particularly in the case of ownership of the product development itself. Like your team, was really just the starting point was keen interest in developing a great product that has value for the customer. That's the case there, right? So teams that keep on going and are always on top really show this strong trait of communication and motivation, and it seems like the case for your team. How do you keep the fire going in your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the traits that I at least look for is always kind of the drive and the fire and the belly, right? When you hire people for an innovation lab or a startup, you're not looking for 9-to-5ers.
Yeah.
You're looking for people that want to drive the mission forward no matter what it takes. And that's kind of the key trait when we initially hired people. So getting the right people is key, and making sure that whatever your mission is, it's aligned with them. If there's no alignment in that piece, you end up getting people that, you know, they might complain if they have to work too many hours, or you know, they'll question every single thing that is being done, and they're not going to prioritize the customer, and that's not something that you want, right? So I think that those are the key points.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Really explains that you know, if you do have the team aligned, you know, their energy is aligned, they are motivated similarly. Actually, the discipline is not something you have to enforce. It's simply an emergence of discipline, and that's a great example there.
Yeah.
Last question. When we talk about alignment, the other important alignment is with senior management
Yeah.
and stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that, particularly since you are an innovation arm, Solaria, and then you have Liberty Mutual, you know, as your core. How does that alignment work for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is think about where insurance is going to go in the future, right? Whether it's in the next year, next 5 years, or next 10 years.
It's about future proofing of
exactly.
Yes.
So the key is to make sure that whatever it is that we're building helps prepare the company for that future. So being very clear about where the industry is headed and how this product, you won't know for sure if something is going to be a success or failure, but you have to be able to outline, like, what is that potential positive impact going to be if it is a success, right? Innovation labs, like I said, are similar to startups in a lot of ways, right? That not everything is going to be a success. You're going to learn a lot too through failure. So I think it's important that, I think we were lucky in the sense that we had senior managers who understood that and are open to the fact that, you know, we need to future proof given how quickly the industry is moving.
Yeah. So it was a clear commitment from both sides, the people who wanted to innovate and your senior leadership that understood that how mission critical it is for the future proofing of the organization.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's the core of the alignment there.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing the story.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great chatting with you, Takeshi.
My pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.